Labeling a severe, chronic inability to handle social friction as empathy is a pathetic, deeply ingrained psychological coping mechanism meticulously designed to hide the central nervous system's absolute terror of real confrontation. Within modern, high-stakes corporate and social hierarchies, highly agreeable individuals constantly delude themselves into believing that constantly bending their personal boundaries to maintain a fraudulent peace is an undeniable sign of high moral virtue. In absolute reality, covert narcissist manipulation relies entirely on this specific, manufactured illusion, mathematically processing your desperate desire to keep everyone comfortable as a bright neon sign broadcasting ultimate biological weakness. You are not sacrificing your own needs because you possess a highly evolved, compassionate soul. You are actively shrinking your presence because the mere thought of enduring unresolved interpersonal tension sends your brain into a state of absolute, paralyzing panic. This highly classified understanding of human behavior and toxic people psychology is currently being heavily suppressed by algorithms designed to keep the general population docile, highly compliant, and perfectly suited to serve as voluntary biological hosts for emotional parasites. Refusing to aggressively shatter this illusion right now mathematically guarantees your internal energy vault will remain entirely unprotected, ensuring your permanent submission to individuals who possess the kinetic energy required to fight. By the exact conclusion of this clinical breakdown, the elite blueprint for permanently eradicating this deeply humiliating trauma response will be fully exposed, providing the impenetrable mental armor required to command authority without ever retreating. Pay absolute attention to the underlying evolutionary mechanics revealed in the following minutes, because your fundamental perception of human virtue, cowardice, and hierarchical dominance is about to be shattered completely and irreversibly. The biological trauma response. The dark reality underlying the constant need to please others is deeply rooted in human behavior psychology, revealing that chronic agreeableness is not a personality trait, but rather a catastrophic biological trauma response triggered by a hyperactive amygdala. Thousands of years ago, early humans quickly learned that standing out, challenging the tribal leaders, or initiating internal conflict carried the immediate, fatal risk of being physically exiled into the unforgiving wilderness, making total submission a highly effective survival strategy. Today, however, that exact same outdated evolutionary mechanism completely short-circuits in modern environments, flooding your bloodstream with toxic levels of cortisol every single time a colleague disrespects you, a partner crosses a boundary, or a stranger manufactures an uncomfortable silence. To rapidly alleviate this severe internal inflammation and escape the crushing sensation of perceived danger, your nervous system frantically deploys the fawn response, forcing you to offer unsolicited apologies, warm smiles, and total compliance simply to neutralize the threat. You mistakenly call this immediate surrender, being the bigger person, completely ignoring the clinical fact that your brain is actively choosing the path of least biological resistance to survive a completely fabricated emotional attack. Every single time you suppress your own justified anger to accommodate another person's chaotic demands, you are suffering a massive internal metabolic penalty, slowly rotting your core self-esteem and permanently fracturing your sovereign identity from the inside out. How predators exploit your fear of conflict. Elite operators utilizing Machiavellian power tactics do not extract your resources by sheer accident. They execute a highly systematic, predatory protocol specifically designed to identify and exploit individuals who are visibly terrified of social friction. These covert emotional manipulators operate on a severe, chronic internal energy deficit, requiring a constant daily harvest of external validation and submission, which they acquire by intentionally manufacturing heavy, awkward tension in the room and waiting to see who breaks the silence first. When the predator drops a calculated, passive-aggressive remark or blatantly ignores a clear instruction, they meticulously watch your facial microexpressions. If you rush forward to nervous laugh and fix the uncomfortable energy, they mathematically confirm your absolute lack of internal spine. By constantly jumping in to act as the room's emotional shock absorber, you are actively handing the sociopath a comprehensive instruction manual on exactly how to drain your leverage, demonstrating that emotional manipulation tactics work flawlessly against your specific psychological profile. This deeply toxic dynamic relies exclusively on your profound fear of being disliked, transforming you into a highly useful, highly compliant tool that can be completely exhausted without ever triggering a defensive retaliation. By proving to the entire social circle that your personal sovereignty collapses under the slightest application of pressure, you actively volunteer for a permanent position at the absolute bottom of the dominance hierarchy, funding the success of your abusers with your own crushed dignity. Pause the video and deeply internalize the gravity of the psychological trap currently being exposed, as your desperate biological need to avoid arguments is actively destroying your potential for future success at this exact millisecond. If you fail to completely decode this specific behavioral exploit within the next 60 seconds, your sovereign identity will be permanently erased by manipulators who already calculate your severe cowardice as free leverage. The narrow window of opportunity to protect your nervous system and establish an unbreakable mental framework is shutting right now, making it absolutely critical that you absorb this clinical data without a single distraction. The dark psychology of fake virtue. The brutal psychological reality of chronic conflict avoidance is that hiding behind the mask of universal kindness is the ultimate, undeniable confirmation of absolute submission, representing one of the most pathetic psychological defense mechanisms documented in dark psychology secrets. People pleasers constantly construct elaborate internal narratives to justify their weakness, convincing themselves that they are highly evolved spiritual beings who are simply above the drama, when in fact they are merely reacting to their own profound inability to tolerate the heavy weight of another person's temporary anger. True respect within any competitive hierarchy, according to the strict laws of power dynamics explained by experts, is entirely predicated on an individual's capacity to firmly hold their ground under intense social pressure, meaning that anyone who constantly folds their hand is assigned a baseline value of 0. The surrounding audience absorbs this behavioral data instantaneously, recognizing that the individual who constantly sacrifices their own needs to keep the peace stands for absolutely nothing concrete, viewing their entire personality as a cheap, highly theatrical performance designed specifically to evade danger. The covert narcissist does not harbor any genuine gratitude for your endless patience. They are exclusively addicted to the profound sense of power they experience when forcing a stronger human being to voluntarily act as their obedient servant without putting up a fight. You must brutally confront the reality that your excessive politeness is merely a sophisticated illusion hiding deep biological terror. And addressing this painful truth is absolutely mandatory for reclaiming genuine sovereignty over your own life. Why elite operators embrace heavy friction. The elite top 1% function on an entirely different neurological frequency, possessing highly developed elite social skills that strictly forbid the deployment of fake virtue or the submissive avoidance of necessary interpersonal conflict. These sovereign operators have ruthlessly purged the pathetic, biological need for external validation from their central nervous systems, understanding perfectly that acting as a universal people pleaser is the absolute fastest mathematical route to permanently losing their position in the social status hierarchy. When covert manipulators inevitably attempt their calculated public dominance tests by pushing boundaries or creating toxic environments, the elite operator does not panic, flinch, or rush to fix the uncomfortable friction with a nervous, accommodating smile. Instead, they execute a terrifying, unblinking cold stillness with absolute precision, leaning heavily into the friction and allowing the uncomfortable silence to hang thickly in the air, forcing the predator to suffocate entirely within their own manufactured disrespect. Breaking the heavy silence first or offering a polite concession guarantees losing the power dynamic, which is precisely why those who dominate social environments heavily project boring, sovereign, absolute cold indifference, watching the manipulator's highly active brain severely short-circuit in real time. Firm boundaries are never softened or apologized for by the truly elite, and offering unearned favors to protect an emotional terrorist's fragile ego simply does not happen under any circumstances, proving that highly valuable respect cannot be purchased with cheap, limitless cowardice, disguised as empathy. You are standing at the absolute edge of a psychological paradigm shift, and the behavioral armor being handed to you today is the absolute only mechanism capable of protecting your life force from complete extraction by emotional parasites. If you close this video before mastering this final execution step, you will wake up tomorrow as obedient prey, permanently volunteering to remain a pathetic social puppet who bleed status every single time they smile at blatant disrespect. The elite guard this specific dark psychology secret incredibly ruthlessly to maintain their absolute dominance over the masses. So do not miss the following clinical instructions if you ever intend to reclaim your psychological leverage. Reclaiming your impenetrable mental armor. The agonizing era of existing as a highly compliant, chronically agreeable biological host ends the exact moment an individual decides that reclaiming social power requires ruthless, immediate physical execution of dark psychology, tricks rather than passive, theoretical understanding of human behavior. The nervous, accommodating urge to step forward and offer unconditional kindness to individuals who are actively crossing your boundaries must be permanently deleted from your behavioral repertoire today, effectively terminating your humiliating role as the room's emotional shock absorber. When a blatant, theatrical attempt to manipulate your emotions is directed at you in a high-stakes competitive setting, you must mentally step aside and allow the heavy social tension to crash loudly onto the floor, absolutely refusing to offer a polite smile to fix the awkwardness yourself. By looking directly at the manipulator with completely cold, dead eyes and projecting the quiet, calculating stillness of an apex predator, you instantly reverse the psychological attack and permanently protect your energy vault without uttering a single syllable. You must accept the brutal biological reality that reclaiming your sovereign power and withholding your unearned empathy will inevitably cause massive, violent anger among your social circle, prompting emotional parasites to throw severe, toxic tantrums as their food source disappears. However, you must let them scream wildly and thrash hysterically in the dark room, because their deep, helpless frustration on the cold floor is the absolute clinical proof that your new mental fortress works flawlessly. The highly toxic, overly accommodating, nice guy identity is completely dead, replaced today by a massive, impenetrable concrete wall. Subscribe and hit the bell immediately to join the ranks of the truly armed elite operators, mastering the heavy power of calculated friction to become utterly untouchable in any highly toxic social environment and dominating the hierarchy forever.